But why do English teachers in grades from K all the way to 12 across this country have to submit to mass timed writing tests, which they know do not fairly assess the abilities of their students or their abilities as teachers? If these tests interfere with evidence-based best teaching practices, if they're harmful to students, if they devalue teachers and deprofessionalize teaching, then why are we forced to continue to use them as we have been for the last 40 years? And why do all teachers learn early on that they need to evaluate every single piece of writing, whether it's a rough draft or a final draft, whether it's a video or an argument essay, using a giant gridded rubric so we can rank the students in a giant list and rank students across classrooms and rank students across schools? We know that those rubrics can't really measure what we are trying to do as teachers in each assignment. Why are we stuck with all of that stuff? The answer is writing assessment theory. And the way that writing assessment theory has been used and abused by giant testing companies, politicians at the state and federal level, school boards, school administrators, and even teachers. What can we do about it? The answer is we have to learn to understand the theory of writing assessment and understand when writing assessment is useful, just, and valid, and when it's harmful, unjust, incompetent, and biased. Welcome to Writing Assessment from Pre-K to 12th grade. Over the next 7 weeks, we're going to work together on Blackboard, but also in Google Classroom to look at all these ideas about writing assessment together. And also, we're going to study the new ideas that will help us to rethink writing assessment and argue for better ways to work with our students and their writing so that we can value each student, meet each student where they are, and provide a more rich, deep writing pedagogy that gets students excited about writing and judges them fairly. Why Google Classroom? Well, New Jersey teachers K to 12 are all using Google Classroom these days, especially since the pandemic, for all kinds of assignments, but especially for writing. We're going to use the same tools you use in your classrooms here as a way to practice them together, and also as a way to understand the way that Google Classroom mediates the work we do, both as teachers and as researchers. Let me show you what is going to happen when you go into Classroom. First, you're going to use a code, which I'm going to give you. That's going to take you into the stream of our classroom. And nothing is too useful there. You see, there's not much here that's useful. But if you click on the classwork tab, as many as you know, the whole course is there. Just as it's outlined in Blackboard, it's also outlined here in Google Classroom. Everything you need to do the entire course is right here in this Google Classroom, including all of the readings. This is an open educational resource course. Everything you need is either linked to, PDF'd, or otherwise attached here in Google Classroom. Everything you need is here. Everything you need is free. We have some key documents at the top, a proposed grading rubric and a proposed grading contract, our syllabus and course schedule, and group class notes, where we're going to work together on a lot of our assignments over the course of the semester. In the first week, you're going to look at the rubric and you're going to look at the contract, and you're going to decide whether you want me to assess your work using a standard grading rubric. And our rubric, drawn from one that's in use right now in a New Jersey high school, looks like this. There are many categories. It's graded from A to DF. And if that's how you want me to assess your work here, we can do that. But you have an option. We're going to talk about grading labor in this classroom. And so there is a proposed grading contract that I have written and that we can negotiate together. And then each of you can decide in the first week of class whether you'd like me to, instead of using a rubric, would you like me to grade your labor in the course, grade you based on how much work you do. And we'll talk more about that in week 1. First, we're going to look at old objective models of assessment, including the key ideas of validity, reliability, and fairness. In week 2, we're going to think about the consequences of assessment. And in particular, we're going to think about the ways that assessment influences, it washes back across teaching and learning in ways that can often be very harmful. We're also going to look at the ways that some assessments and some tests can target specific groups of students. If it's unfair to some students, if some students perform poorly in it based on who they are, we shouldn't be using those tests. And we're going to talk about grading labor in week 3. In week 4, we're going to look at a theory of writing instruction called translingualism and connected to that rhetorical assessment. In week 5, we're going to look at ecological assessment. In week 6, we're going to think about digital composing. In week 7, we're going to look at briefly at performance as a model of assessment. And then we're going to wrap up the course by completing 3 projects: your website, a presentation about writing assessment, and your last draft of your analysis and synthesis of all the ideas and sources that we have studied here in the course together. Altogether, I hope this course will give you the tools you need to understand how assessment works and how it affects you and your students. Armed with those tools, you should be prepared to push back and resist bad assessments and bad assessment systems in order to give yourself more room, more agency, more power as a teacher to teach writing the way you know will work best for you and your students.